Most people think silence means you lost. The Stoics knew better. Silence is where you test hearts, reveal lies, build power, and master love without begging for it. Today, I'll show you why the quiet man always wins, even in the darkest moments of desire. Silence is not weakness. Silence is a mirror. It reflects who is real and who is afraid. When a man goes quiet, a woman feels the shift in the air before she hears a single reason. She senses the distance not as emptiness, but as energy reorganizing itself. Stoicism teaches that a person trained in stillness becomes unreadable, not because he has no emotion, but because emotion no longer controls him. In relationships, this is the first moment suspense begins. When the storm inside you no longer spills outside, the other person starts searching for meaning in the smallest changes. This is the power of quiet, not manipulation, but self-possession. The world respects noise, but people fear quiet. Because quiet means you are thinking, you are measuring, you are no longer reacting. This is where relationships reveal themselves. Not in your voice, but in your absence of it. The modern age has trained people to chase validation, to demand answers instantly, and fear distance like death. But the Stoics trained distance like discipline. Marcus Aurelius wrote that true strength comes when we stop needing an audience. In love, needing becomes the loudest noise you can make. Desire is natural, yes, even intense desire, the kind that pulls your pulse into your throat. Stoicism does not ask you to deny desire. It asks you to govern it, because ungoverned desire turns a man into a beggar, a prisoner rattling the bars of a cage he put himself in. But a man who can sit with longing, especially when intimacy is real, when time shared under dim light and quiet breath created a history between bodies and souls, that man becomes something different, not cold, not detached, but composed. And composition creates a silence that feels heavier than shouting. Because it carries choice, not desperation. When a relationship cracks, it never cracks in the noise. It cracks in the pauses between sentences. The moments where someone hesitates not because they are speechless, but because truth has weight and lies require rehearsal. In these moments, silence is your ally. When she watches you sit in quiet, steady, she starts hearing every unspoken thing she feared would be said. Suspense grows not from your intent to intimidate, but from her awareness that you finally could. Stoicism carves a man into a thinker, and thinkers become dangerous only to illusions. Not to love, but illusions must die for love to survive, and death is always silent. Women are not confused by silence. They are revealed by it, because when you speak less, she starts speaking more, not from nerves, but from instinct. In relationships, the quieter you become, the more the hidden patterns surface, the protective masks slip, the careful tone dissolves, and what remains is emotional truth. She might say your distance feels different. She's right, because ordinary silence is passive. Stoic silence is active. It is a choice. It is full of awareness. It says, I am here, but I am no longer yours to steer. This is not abandonment. This is clarity. This is the moment the room tilts, not from anger, but from awakening. Most relationships die from dependency. Very few die from independence, because dependency is fragile. When something fragile breaks, it spreads noise and debris. Independence is tempered like steel. When steel bends, it bends quietly, slowly, and only under serious pressure. The Stoics believed nothing outside ourselves is fully ours. That includes love. That includes lust. That includes the person whose warm skin, soft voice, or electric eye contact once made you forget your own heartbeat. They are not yours, they are with you, and with is a gift, not a guarantee. This is the mindset that protects love. Because the moment you try to possess something wild, it must choose escape to stay alive. Stoicism teaches emotional endurance. That endurance is tested hardest not in arguments, but in passion, in the moments where closeness is real and hunger is real, where two people stop talking and start breathing like one, where intimacy creates a language without words. Stoics do not run from intimacy, they just refuse to let intimacy become identity. You can feel fire without becoming ash. Feeling is human, becoming is choice. Stoicism makes choice louder than feeling, even when choice is quiet. Suspense in relationships begins the moment you outgrow fear. Not fear of losing her, but fear of losing yourself. Because the moment she realizes you do not fear emptiness, emptiness begins fearing you. Most men lose relationships because they collapse inward at the first sign of distance. Stoics teach, do not collapse, observe, because sometimes distance is a door closing, and sometimes it is a test to see who will run after what. When you do not run, the test inverts. She starts wondering if she ran too soon. This is not gamesmanship. This is nature recognizing mastery. Silence breeds curiosity. Curiosity births revelation. Revelation births truth. Truth births either dissolution or transformation. And transformation is the goal Stoicism seeks, not to end relationships, but to ripen them. The Stoics believed you cannot change others, but you can change the space your presence holds. Silence is not absence, silence is space. Space makes people reveal shape. When you fill every pause trying to soothe insecurity, you smother revelation. But if you hold space through silence, people start pouring themselves into that vacuum. She will start telling you what you never needed to ask. This is where suspense matures, the moment where you know more from not asking at all. Men think attraction requires volume. It doesn't, it requires certainty. Uncertainty asks questions. Certainty observes answers before they form into letters. Stoicism trains a man to anchor certainty inside himself. When certainty lives in you instead of in her responses, fear falls from your shoulders. Attraction feels that drop like a seismic event. This is why the quiet man becomes irresistible without explanation. Because people do not fall for your words, they fall for your unshakable center. Relationships are emotional, physical, mental, spiritual. Stoicism does not remove any of these dimensions. It protects them from self, betrayal, and self. Betrayal is the only betrayal Stoics consider unforgivable. A partner can wound you, passion can confuse you, silence can test you. But if you betray yourself, you were never fighting her. You were fighting your own reflection. Stoicism ends that civil war. Peace inside creates quiet outside. Quiet outside creates suspense in others. Because when your inner world stops spilling into chaos, curiosity begins. Stoicism teaches ruled mind, steady heart. Desire belongs to the heart. Decisions belong to the mind. When desire and decision merge without conflict, intimacy becomes connection, not addiction. This is why Stoic relationships are deep, deliberate, and powerful, not frantic, not insecure, powerful. Because real closeness is not born from desperation, it's born from self-command. I've watched men panic when she pulls back. But Stoicism asks you to breathe, sit, witness. Fear of losing someone is louder than losing itself. It produces noise that stains dignity. Dignity lost is attraction poisoned. But if you sit quietly when distance arrives, dignity remains untouched. And dignity is a password to respect now. Here is the brutal secret Stoics know. Silence is not used to punish others. Silence punishes illusions. If someone needs your sound to feel valuable, they will collapse into insecurity when the sound stops. But if someone values your presence more than your noise, your silence becomes a bridge, not a funeral. This is why she starts leaning in when you lean inward. Not because you pulled her, but because you finally stopped pulling at all. Relationships built on ego end in noise. Relationships built on truth end in wisdom. Wisdom speaks rarely. But when wisdom speaks, it does not echo, it imprints. Stoicism makes every word earned and every silence deliberate. This is where suspense becomes emotional gravity. Romance is a stage most people perform on. Stoicism makes romance a choice instead of a performance. You do not need theatrics to reflect emotional depth. Emotional depth does not demand decoration to feel legitimate. When she sees a man who can withstand silence, she sees danger only to lies, not to love. Because passion disciplined becomes warmth, not wildfire. This is the unpopular modern truth. Strong men love deeply but attach lightly. Weak men attach deeply but love lightly. Stoicism asks you to train your longing, and longing trained becomes power instead of panic. The more you can bear quiet, the more your partner stops fearing your strength. Because silence is a sign of peace, not abandonment, only when the person holding it is not ruled by fear. In relationships, the strongest crossroads are quiet. When nothing is being said, everything is being decided. Stoics train emotional discipline. Discipline does not kill love, it organizes it, because love disorganized becomes noise and insecurity. Love organized becomes quiet gravity that pulls without grabbing. She might say you're distant. Stoicism says I'm measured. Distance driven by fear pushes away. Distance driven by clarity draws inward to examine truth. Most men fear losing intimacy. Stoicism reframes intimacy as connection instead of possession. Real closeness brings vulnerability, but Stoicism says vulnerability must not spill into dependency. Feeling closeness is human. Becoming ruled by closeness is surrender. Stoicism does not deny passion. It governs it, because ungoverned passion makes a man apologize for power he should have worn as posture. I've seen relationships crumble not in shouting, but in pauses between lines, where truth weighs too heavy to be said instantly, but felt instantly. Stoicism teaches that wanting is natural, needing is slavery, attraction is not loud, it is assured. Stoicism makes assurance internal. When assurance stops depending on others' feedback, suspense begins solving itself without words asked. Silence makes curiosity bloom. Curiosity makes truths blossom. Stoicism allows connection without ego performance. Intimacy governed by a man anchored in self creates warmth, intrigue, suspense, loyalty, and reverence, not for control, but for self-possession. Most relationships today die from dependency. Stoic relationships die only from truth, if truth demands it. But most often Stoicism ripens relationships instead of burying them. In relationships, the loudest thing you can offer is constancy. And constancy speaks quietly. Now, let me tell you about the first night a Stoic heart is tested in passion instead of pain. It's usually not betrayal or distance that exposes a man, it's desire. The kind that pulls at your chest like a tide pulling the sea backward before something massive rises. You remember moments where closeness was easy, where silence between two people didn't feel like abandonment, but like oxygen. The kind where words faded naturally because eye contact, breath timing, and stillness carried more meaning than sentences ever could. Modern relationships fear this silence. They label it loss, confusion, or detachment. Stoicism labels it presence, awareness, and mastery. This is where men are forged, not in speeches, but in stillness. Stoicism does not tell a man to extinguish desire. It tells a man not to drown in it, because the danger is never wanting her warmth. It's needing it to feel alive. The deadliest cage is the one built under whispering candlelight by your own insecurity. Desire is human. Self-loss is optional. This is where suspense grows, not from drama, but from inner transformation. She begins wondering not what you feel, but what you decide, and decisions held quietly are heavier than those declared loudly. You see, most people think intimacy is where power dissolves. Stoics know intimacy is where power is revealed. Not physical domination, emotional sovereignty. When you sustain the hunger without letting it own you, you become unpredictable to those who live in emotional chaos. This unpredictability forms suspense. She senses it like thunder forming far away where clouds stack silently before cracking the sky open. When a Stoic man goes silent after a fracture, it shifts meaning. Ordinary silence is passive. Stoic silence is intentional. It weighs more because it carries self-awareness instead of self-erasure. She wonders not because you vanished, but because you remained unplayed. And a man unplayed is a man unclaimed by illusion. Modern love screams for reassurance. Stoic love answers without panic. A man unmoved by the quake inside himself is terrifying only to illusions, never to love itself. When she senses you can carry closeness without bargaining for it, suspense thickens in the air like fog. The Stoic mind is not numb to longing. It's trained to not beg under it, because longing trained becomes depth. Begging kills suspense instantly. Stoicism keeps suspense alive by keeping the soul intact. Now, let's talk about the moment every relationship reaches without warning but always by destiny, the silent moment. Not silence as absence, silence as judgment. She pulls away, you pull inward, not chasing extinction but choosing clarity. Because Stoicism believes the only person you must not betray is yourself. Most relationships fail because men collapse into voice when fear arrives. Stoics sit quietly when truth arrives. Truth speaks rarely. Truth reveals fully when not rushed. A woman may say you're distant, not because you left, but because she finally sees you centered. You do not collapse. You become still enough for the truth to show itself, and this stillness creates suspense not from lack of feeling, but from refusal to surrender identity to feeling. In relationships, the loudest thing you can offer is constancy. Constancy speaks without begging. Stoicism does not declare war on passion. It declares peace inside a man so passion cannot weaponize him. The strongest crossroads are quiet. The softer your inner chaos becomes, the louder your emotional gravity feels without noise. Curiosity blooms when you stop asking and start watching. Vulnerability becomes strength the moment dependency is removed from it. Stoicism lets you feel closeness without forfeiting your pulse to panic. Attraction is not volume, it is certainty. Certainty seated inside a man becomes silence outside a man. And a man whose silence is full of self-awareness instead of self-loss creates a suspense the world cannot decode without leaning in closer. Now, imagine the moment that scares the world but empowers the Stoic. The night after a conflict, when she waits for your explanation and instead only hears quiet footsteps, calm breath, and the unmistakable rhythm of a man who is not drowning in the waves but measuring the tide. Stoicism says this is not retreat. This is discipline, not a performance, a dismantling of illusion. Because people trained on chaos fear the man whose soul finally stops shaking, even when his pulse once did. Intimacy, real intimacy, is a moment most people perform in but very few command inside. Stoics command it, not by controlling the other person, but by controlling the self in the presence of fire. This is why Stoic silence carries more weight than emotional noise, because it is full of self-awareness, self-respect, and deliberate self-possession. And self-possession births the slowest and strongest suspense in others. When you go quiet in passion instead of pain, you break every fragile script the modern heart expects. You rewrite the atmosphere, not the partner. And an atmosphere rewritten becomes emotional suspense no algorithm can compete with. Most men think they must speak loudly to prove love or clarify fracture. Stoics prove love through steadiness and clarify fracture through silence that observes instead of demands. This silence is deliberate and powerful. Stoicism teaches this. You do not own love, you steward it. Stewardship respects distance. Possession fears it. When intimacy is connection, not identity, the pulse remains your friend, not your warden. Suspense grows not in words spoken, but in truth witnessed. Dependency collapses under silence. Strength matures inside it. The quieter your chaos becomes, the louder your self-mastery feels to others. Love is not loud. True love is calm gravity pulling without grabbing. Stoicism does not erase longing. It dignifies it by refusing to apologize for having a backbone under it. Most people fall for noise. The Stoic heart falls for meaning, and meaning is always quiet before it is undeniable. 500 word count reached below, continuous flow maintained. In the deepest quiet of the heart, attraction is not negotiated, it's felt. Not spoken, sensed. Most people think desire is a fire that must roar to be real, but the Stoics knew that fire has its own silence. The moment before a spark becomes flame, everything is still. In relationships, the moment before someone chooses to walk deeper into your life or vanish from it, the air sits tight like fate inhaling. Suspense is not created by drama, it is created by meaning unspoken. When you are quiet, you magnify meaning. Not because you disappeared, but because you stopped spilling yourself into chaos. Most men think silence is where intimacy dies. Stoicism teaches silence is where intimacy is tested, authenticated, and transformed or released without theatrical destruction. Marcus Aurelius believed that control begins and ends with the self. That principle becomes hardest when passion sits close enough to touch your pulse. There are nights in a man's life that do not test his wallet, his voice, or his reputation, but test his longing. The kind of longing that does not scream but strains, the kind that makes every quiet second feel like a timer you did not set. Stoicism does not require you to deny longing. It requires you not to let longing own you, because if longing owns you, you are no longer a man in the room, you are the room shaking itself apart. When longing becomes disciplined, it becomes depth, and depth creates suspense, not from instability, but from self-awareness. She starts feeling a man who is mastered by self, not by her reactions. This is where intrigue grows. This is where silence creates gravity. People lean into gravity, they run from noise. Relationships are usually interpreted in words. Stoicism interprets relationships in patterns. When she speaks, do not only hear the sentence, hear the fear, impulse, or peace under the words. When you speak less, she speaks more, not because you demanded it, but because your silence creates a space the soul must fill. And in that filling, truth arrives not in shards, but in full shape. Most relationships break when the ego is panicked into defense. Stoic relationships break only when truth politely demands it, and more often, Stoic relationships do not break at all, they ripen. Ordinary silence hides, Stoic silence reveals. When a Stoic heart goes quiet after a conflict, it doesn't vanish, it sharpens. There is a quiet moment every relationship reaches that feels like a crossroads and a cliff's edge. Not screamed into existence, just arrived at, when the arguing voice finally stops and the inner pulse is the only clock left ticking. She begins reading not your mouth but your mind, not your sound but your soul. This is the moment where she expects weakness, begging, anger, or collapse. But Stoicism sits still, not cold, composed, because composed longing feels stronger than panicked chasing. Stoics believed that nothing external should dismantle your inner world. A partner is not an external enemy. A partner is an external test. Passion is not a sin. Passion is a human signal. The sin is losing self inside the signal. A Stoic man doesn't stop feeling desire. He stops apologizing for owning himself inside desire. This is the unspoken rule that elevates a man from predictable to magnetic. Because women don't fall for loud certainty, they fall for quiet self-certainty. They don't remember the man who shouts that he is strong. They remember the man whose soul didn't wobble even when his pulse once did. Modern relationships fear silence after intimacy, but Stoics know that intimacy and silence are not enemies. Silence is the language of people who are no longer performing to earn love. They are earning love by not performing at all. And this creates suspense. Suspense not of abandonment, but suspense of meaning, consequence, self-possession, and self-awareness. In the room that finally grows quiet, a Stoic man sits not as a question, but as a statement. People don't crave loud love. They crave undeniable love, and undeniable love begins quietly. Silence in relationships is not silence of defeat. It is silence of sorting. Sorting truth, sorting self, sorting attachment, sorting identity from dependency, and sorting longing from weakness. When you do this quietly, other people feel it loudly without needing a single declared explanation. Silence reveals not who left, but who is real. This is Stoicism in love. This is Stoicism in suspense. This is Stoicism in fire without panic. This is Stoicism in relationships where the quiet man does not lose intimacy. He protects it from illusion until it matures into truth. And truth, when it finally speaks, speaks rarely, but it speaks fully. The quiet man wins not because he vanished, but because he stayed whole enough for the truth to reveal itself. This is why the Stoic heart is suspenseful, not loud. unshakably quiet.